So yeah, I've been working in the Snohomish River Estuary since 2006 in collaboration with NOAA, the Northwest Fisheries Science Center, and Snohomish County, as well as many other agencies to do comprehensive monitoring of the restoration projects in the estuary. Today, I'm going to give you a quick overview of our restoration monitoring efforts in the Snohomish River. Then I'm going to focus on the different resources that we utilize to conduct our monitoring, both data sources and methodologies. We were able to utilize some existing methodologies, modify others for our data collection efforts and to meet our needs, and in some cases had to develop our own data collection methodologies. First of all, just sort of to give you a better understanding of where we're at. Looks like my slide is not advancing. Oh, there we go. I'll just sort of situate you where the Snohomish Estuary is located. So within the Puget Sound, within the Salish Sea region, within what is called the Whidbey Basin, which is which drains basically behind three rivers that drain behind Whidbey Island. So the Skagit, which is the largest river system in the Puget Sound, the Snohomish, which is the second largest, and then the Still-Squamish. So we're located about, I think I already said, 25 miles north of Seattle. We have 5 different salmon populations that spawn in the river, including ESA-listed Chinook and steelhead and bull trout. So a lot of work to do in the region. So here we go. So one question is, why do we do the restoration monitoring in the Snohomish? Obviously, we're looking to recover Chinook and other salmon species to self-sustaining and harvestable levels. To do this, we need to restore the habitat that they utilize so they can flourish. In particular, the Snohomish has a lot of potential. Up to 30% of the historic estuary habitat is potentially looking to be restored. We've already restored almost 1,500 acres in the estuary with several projects you can see there in the green. The ones in pink are those slated are sort of in the feasibility conceptual conceptual model status. And then we have one orange one, which is Dyking District 6 restoration project, which is now called Chinook Marsh. So there's a lot of things going on, a lot of monitoring project or restoration projects that we want to know. How are they working? Are we doing the right thing? Are we meeting our goals of recovering, salmon populations? And, we want to implement adaptive management. So, you have to, first of all, I'm sort of going to point out here, the first thing that was done was the development of a monitoring plan. And one point here I want to make sure for people is to remember that when you develop a monitoring plan, you need to make sure that you have your sort of goals and hypotheses laid out clearly to answer the questions that you have. So the vision of this monitoring program was to develop an intensive project scale monitoring framework focused on key monitoring elements that were nested within a landscape scale or estuary-wide framework with shared core monitoring elements. This approach was designed to allow project scale responses to be evaluated excuse me, within the context of the larger landscape scale patterns. So, if you look at fish in a project site, those fish come from, are distributed across the estuary and, across the watershed. So you want some ability to measure whether what you're measuring at a project site is different because of the project site or what's going on there, or because it just happens to be a bad year for outmigration. So that's important to put your project within context. In this way, the monitoring framework would provide a consistent long-term project and system scale framework from which responses at both an individual project level and the cumulative ecosystem response for multiple projects across the landscape could be evaluated using just a core suite of monitoring elements and standardized protocols. We had the late Casey Rice and several other staff at NOAA Northwest Fisheries Science Center worked with us to develop a comprehensive monitoring plan for the estuary, initially primarily focused on the Tulalip Tribe's restoration project, which then expanded to the entire estuary and incorporated monitoring of other restoration sites coming online in the estuary. So you will notice that the document on the right there is available for download at the Salish Sea Restoration platform, where that has been uploaded. And I will say I have a lot of URLs listed on this, and at the very end, I will have a slide with all of them. So if you want to do a screen grab then, you will be able to get all of those then. So you don't have to frantically do screen grabs or write things down now. So this is sort of the overarching thing. We made very clear restoration goals that our monitoring effort is intended to assess and inform. Here, the goal, restore historical tidal circulation processes and functions to the Quillet Estuary and move the biological integrity and function of the site towards a comparable natural habitats of the region. So then we came up with sort of these different categories of topography, hydrology, biota, society. What are we looking to get out of these? What is the goal of this restoration project? And then you can see on the right there, we had a big list of all of the different, elements to help answer those questions, with the ones in green being the core. And you can see at the different scales, there's a project scale and a system-wide scale. And so our effort was to get at least at a minimum, all of these core data collected, and then some of this other supplemental stuff that helps inform other stuff. And also, when we do data collection, collect some of this data. We may not have money to analyze it, but be able to go and use that data in the future. So you can never go back and collect more data. You can only collect data when you collect it. So it's one of those things that, sometimes people think it's overkill, but it's not always bad to collect more data. Let's see here. So obviously there's lots of sources for monitoring methods and data sources and whatnot, but I think, we initially looked at, books, scientific journals, reports, white papers, gray literature, web pages, and web tools. We have all of this content that's out there. Obviously, it's spread around, and there's a bunch of work to pull that into one spot. And obviously, you have multiple content creators from different institutions. So finding all this information does take some work. And here's just some examples there of some books and literature that we looked at. But yeah, so these are different sources. But right now, what I'm going to do is I'm going to move over to basically giving information about the different components or monitoring elements that we did, and then where we kind of grabbed resources or from different areas or methodologies and data, and where in some cases we actually just had to create our own methodologies just because to meet our question goals. So first of all, I sort of want to just put it in context. A lot of restoration is based on returning to historical conditions. In this case, in the past, we've used, in the Puget Sound, we had a paper written by Collins et al., and he basically took the historical coastal survey data. I think it was at the time was the Department of War that did the data collection, or maybe it was the Department of the Army, and they basically in the late 1800s mapped all of the coastal areas of, in our case, the Puget Sound, and they actually did all along the West Coast. And this data is also available on NOAA's website, but I don't remember exactly where it's located, but I have found it. So we did this basically to reconstruct, what were the historic conditions, how much estuary was there before, and then that data is available on the Puget Sound River History Project website. And you can see that there. But more recently, PMEP updated that layer using sort of that existing data and then updating it with more detailed work, and that was what Kate mentioned there earlier. So now we have a new one, and so now when we reference information, and you'll have noticed earlier the Brophy et al., that is our referencing that historic data for comparison about where we are with restoration. So it's sort of like your baseline, where are we trying to get to, what existed there before. Information. Slide here. So another important thing, and I was, going through this sort of while we collected data, and one of the things we did develop our own data sort of collection network with a bunch of data loggers that records salinity, temperature, and pressure, or which we use to calculate depth. And we have to use other resources to make this information meaningful. So here we have the USGS stream flow data, which we use to basically understand what is the river doing and how does that affect what's going on in the estuary with the salinity levels and water turbidity and whatnot. Additionally, those sensors require that you calibrate them or compensate them for atmospheric pressure. So you can also put a logger out to record that and use that. But another method that we've used is to basically use the National Weather Service climate data, historic climate data, based out of Arlington Airport, which isn't far from our location for restoration work, and we use that to calibrate that information. So it isn't necessarily data that we're using directly, but it's data that we need to better understand and to calibrate our instruments. So that's sort of an important component where don't think of the data just as that, but you might need that data to support what you are doing. Another important element that we used and was important for in particular marsh vegetation is elevation information. And also this goes into sea level rise assessments and whatnot. Fortunately, in the Puget Sound, we have a group called the Puget Sound LIDAR Consortium, and they collect data, and they basically have a standardized contract, and they have standardized deliverables sort of for those LIDAR contracts. So we have this resource where we're able to go in and basically download for free this elevation information and utilize it in the estuary. And I will say the information flow does go in two directions because we've had a decent sized budget for this stuff. So we've actually been able to have LIDAR flights flown, and that data is actually in that LIDAR consortium. And so we just had stuff go at low tide. Let's see, next slide here. Another mention is aerial imagery or satellite imagery. I know Isa mentioned this earlier. Good sources for this is the USGS AROS data for satellite information. So you can download Landsat data, and sometimes it's already been analyzed for, say, vegetation classification and whatnot. Another really good source that some people don't know about is the National Agriculture Imagery Program, and that is conducted every 2 to 3 years across the country, and it's free data and usually a very high resolution imagery. And sometimes they even do near infrared, so you can actually do some remote sensing work. So we've used this as our sort of base maps and also for mapping out some of the vegetation and changes in the site. Additionally, we also do sediment tracking. Isa mentioned this, and we use what's surface elevation tables. All of our information and methodology, or sort of all of our methodology, is based on the USGS website, which is right here. And we were able to get them to come out and help us. And we have since also provided guidance and training to other folks in the region. And if down there at the bottom, we did end up coming up with a recent publication. I will say about this data, it is a long-term data set and takes 5 to 10 years before you start seeing stuff, but it's a very valuable way of evaluating net elevation changes and compensating for shallow subsidence. So we also did some avian monitoring at the Balut site. We initially had a thing, we basically used a standard North American marsh bird monitoring protocol, but since we started our work, there has been an effort in the CLSC to have basically standardized monitoring framework. And that actually is now available at the Eco Studies Institute, this final report for guidance on that work. So this is something that I'm not sure if we're going to use in the future, but you know, provides a standardized overall approach for things. Fish sampling, I am not going to go too much into this because we basically developed the fish sampling design, was mostly designed by NOAA's fisheries staff. But we do use standard protocols for collecting on our stuff, and that is in our actually monitoring plan, which again is available on the CLSC restoration platform. And then there's also the Salmonids Field Protocols Handbook, which we utilize for the basis for our methods for fish collection.
You've got about a minute left.
Yeah, I have a couple slides. Yeah, I'll be done real quick. So invertebrates, we didn't have a good thing, so we actually had a Western Washington graduate student who's working currently on doing that. We have a quality assurance project plan available for that, but have not put it online, but we will probably be loading that up to the CLSC restoration platform. Vegetation monitoring, we ended up developing our own process. Again, that information is available on the CLSC platform in that monitoring program document. And then this has sort of been gone over, but some site-specific information. CLSC Restoration Project has site-specific, so about specific restoration projects. And also PRISM, which is our grant tracking program for restoration, also has work. And then real quick, some other sources of information for methods is we have Department of Ecology. I imagine California has equivalent, Oregon has equivalent sites, and also tribal websites also have information available on methods. And then finally, there is data available out there if you can't collect it. Both EPA has the STORET, which is all of the data collected under EPA funds is supposed to be uploaded to this. So in theory, you might be able to mine for additional data for that. And then Washington State also has its own equivalent, which is the EIM, which you can also mine for a lot of its water quality data. But there is other stuff that is going to be in there. And if you have a shortage or don't have data historically pre-restoration, this might be a good source for you to go in and get this information. So that's all I have. I obviously have no time for questions, but this is all of those links that were in the presentation. So if you want to do a quick screen grab, there you are. And looks like I burned up my time and then some. Thank you.